Ladies and gentlemen, this is Cheats, and we have a special guest joining the Cheats Movement podcast. It's early morning for him because he's out in California. Daniel Horine from Pop Fly Pop Shot. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Cheats.
So, some people can see it behind me. I will actually move it up as well. So, Daniel does these amazing uh, artistic rendition of comic book covers that feature baseball players of all genres. It spans the globe. I got introduced to your work, believe it or not, through I guess the algorithm is working. It was an Instagram suggestion that said, "Hey, you like baseball, you like art, you like creativity. You might want to look at like one of these renditions." And I instantly went down a rabbit hole of I guess weeks and weeks, months and months, nearly a year of your work now, and it
Mhm.
is phenomenal, Daniel. It is
Thank
amazing.
you.
First and foremost, tell us a little bit about this particular project and how it came to you, how it got started, and how you married your artistic talent with obviously baseball and these historic figures. How did it all come about?
Well, by accident, really, but you know, I'll start at the end and then go back to the beginning.
Sure.
Um, Kind of on a whim, someone said, "Oh, you should do a Will Clark, my favorite player in this style." And because I had done a Dale Murphy piece and then maybe a Bo Jackson piece and Ken Griffey Jr. Not the covers, but just sort of a comic style rendition. But nothing that I would call a project. It's like, oh, I'll try this. So anyway, a buddy of mine saw that. It's like, oh, you should do Will Clark. Okay, so I did it and never finished it. Put it on the shelf for months. Completely forgot that I had even done it until I dug up the file one day. Oh, that's right. So I finished it and not even asking my wife. I just kind of on a whim. I'll do one of these a week and sell it for a week and retired after that. It was just a very unintentional choice to just see what happens. 'Cause I had been doing art and for my whole life and nothing had really, there wasn't a lot of traction. Like I mentioned to you before we were on the air, lots of passion, no traction.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't a lot of intent or expectations putting it out there. It's like, well, I'll give this a try, and came downstairs and said, "Oh, lovely wife, I've decided to do this. We'll see what happens." And it just kind of grew from there, and here we are almost a year later, still doing it almost every week, and it's become a pretty big operation. And kind of where it comes from is even before the project, I've really felt that I just wanted to kind of marry the I guess you'd call it nerd culture and sports culture. That I really feel that they belong together. um as a kid, my whole world was just baseball and comic books, and that there really was no thought about nerd culture or sports culture. It was just the things that you love, and that's what it was for me and so many kids too, growing up in the junk wax era, and the baseball card boom,
Sure.
and comics were big then. Batman had just gone on the screen, 1989. Superheroes were starting to become part of like the not just an obscure convention type conversations, but going mainstream. So it was this time in the 80s and 90s of just these two forms heightened. And as I started to dig into the project, it really felt like, oh, this is actually a really good vehicle to tell these stories. Because when you're talking about superheroes, when you're a little kid looking up at these grown men playing ball, that's very much how you see them,
Mhm.
as these superheroes, larger than life, untouchable, unreachable humans that are doing things that are well beyond the scope of anything that you could comprehend. So I think that's what's been fun for me, is trying to recapture and give that essence of these larger than life figures, and when you look at the cover, hopefully see them through those little 10-year-old eyes.
Well, the passion for the game comes through hand in hand in each kind of cover rendition operation that you do. Obviously, you've had a lifelong passion for art that you've been able to allow you to hone your skills. Merging them together seemed like just a perfect marriage in regards. And the just hearing you talk about it and hearing that this kind of just kind of came together,
Mhm.
and now it's really taken off, is just completely fascinating. I just recently did a panel. I moderated a panel on passion projects, and it was a panel of people that had different careers, but their passion projects are really taken off. It's fitting that I'm talking to you today because this is purely started as a passion project as you described, but to this day, it's still very much a passion project of yours, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I have a. It's not my job. It's what I do on nights and weekends, and I absolutely love it.
Talk to me about just your history with baseball. I've heard you talk about it in the past, on other interviews, and it seems like since you were able to play and go to the field and be a part of baseball culture, you have been. Talk to me about your history and love for the game of baseball.
Well, it's sort of it was the passion of my youth. I'll credit my dad. He's no longer with us, but he was the baseball is sort of our common language. He was my whole family is construction workers, firefighters, work with the hands, police officers. And here comes me, artist, musician, and there's a chasm. There's a chasm between me and everybody else.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But baseball was this really neat little thing that I was able to connect with my dad through, and he would take me to games and not Dodger games. They're my spiritual team. The Braves are my team, but the Dodgers are my spiritual team.
Right.
Take me to Dodger games and get there early so I can just watch batting practice and try to get autographs if I could. And so that's just where, Dodger Stadium is really where it was fostered with my dad and my folks. And like a lot of boyhood passions, sort of fades after a while. So, my 20s is doing other things. And then in my 30s and 40s, I just sort of rediscovered my love for the game and been trying to, work with it, communicate it ever since.
When I look at the catalog, and we'll talk about some of them in particular, but it seemed to me a particular time period, like the one you're describing, whether it was the kind of the 80s, early 90s, seemed to step out. Will Clark was number one. There's definitely a Ricky Henderson, Don Mattingly.
Yeah.
You mentioned that particular time period in baseball was so fascinating. It was amazingly the characters, the one thing I always talk about when we talk about baseball today is that they have amazing athletes and amazing they're probably physically able to do things that our players in the late 70s and 80s can't do, just strength training differently. But the characters of the late 70s and the 80s and the stories that they told seem to be just like of these mythological proportions. You seem to capture in your artwork and in your covers some of those stories, no matter who we're talking about. And it's just awesome for a fan to see the stories inside the stories of each cover. When you started, you said Will Clark was was number one. First, I would be interested to find out from you why Will Clark, being that I know you're a Dale Murphy fan. Dale Murphy's your guy.
Yeah.
Why was Will Clark number one? And how do you go about the selection process of what stories you want to tell?
Well, the reason, I'll say this: Dale Murphy is number one of like the concept, the marriage of comics and art for me. I got to actually work with Dale a couple of years ago, doing his merchandise, and one of the things that we had done was a comic style art print, not a cover, but it's sort of a single panel
Okay.
So he's proto pot fly. Um, but pot fly, kind of as it is today, is based on my buddy's recommendations. Like, oh, my favorite player is Will Clark. And he's an artist as well. It's like, I'll trade you a Dale Murphy painting for a Will Clark rendition. So Dale Murphy is tied to number one somehow.
You don't have to explain. I got you.
Yeah. So so that's why Will Clark.
How do you go about telling this? How do you go about selecting what players you're going to do and telling the stories that you want to tell?
It really, there's a lot of research that goes into these, a lot of just digging and finding the stories. It's not the most interesting thing in the world for me to like oil can Boyd. I'll draw a picture of him as an oil can. That's not very interesting. I want to find those narratives and find the hook really in these players' stories. I'll use Al Rabowski as a example. His nickname, the Mad Hungarian. It's an interesting nickname, but what do I do with that? Do I just make a crazy guy? I don't know. But so the player was interesting, but I didn't really have my narrative. And then just one day, as I'm just kind of looking and combing through stories and things like that, I found this little 1 or 2 sentence anecdote about Al Rabowski, in that he had a ring that he said was a family heirloom from Dracula, and then it warded off werewolves. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's my hook, there's my story. Right. It wasn't particularly significant about his career, but it's just kind of it's really what helped it gel all together. And I found my narrative like within that little nugget. So I'm always looking, I'm combing through anything I can find to find those little hooks that kind of pull me in as an artist that has a story that I want to tell, So I don't have a list of players that I'm trying to get through. Mostly it's just week to week, just kind of searching and finding, and a lot of hunting and pecking, trying to find those hooks. And I've got multiple projects going on at the same time. I might work a little here, it's like a mixing table, taking it back to music. It's like a mixing table, and different things are at different volumes. Might have a I don't know, a Bo Jackson, but he's down here way in the mix. But I don't know. I can't think of anyone. Kirk Gibson is I've got some fully fleshed ideas on him. So there's a lot going on, and just kind of whatever really rises to the top throughout the weeks as I'm working on it.
Well, one of the things that stand out to me, and it's, I don't know, like I said, it's all kind of comes by inspiration, I'm assuming. But I mean, I don't know if it's concentrated effort, but you've done an amazing job of serving up diversity in kind of just the composition. When I look at kind of the retired covers, and I see Henry Aaron, and I see Josh Gibson, and I think the one that's on sale right now is Luis Aparicio. Like, a lot of people don't know about Luis Aparicio, and he's an amazing player. It just seems so Willie Stargell. I mean, you just done so much to capture, I think, just the wonderful kind of diversity and inclusionness of a sport that, let's just be frank, in 2021 struggles a bit, especially with Black American players. I saw a stat the other day, and it just, I know it's true, but it steeps in my mind that the kind of highest percentage of African American baseball players in the major leagues was 1981. So, because we were doing a lot of Jackie Robinson research and stuff. So from 47 to 81 was kind of the watershed, and since 81 it's gone down. Is that something that you think about, or is it just kind of comes because, again, you've done an amazing job capturing the diversity of the sport and the beauty of the diversity in baseball?
I really appreciate you noticing that. It's something that's important to me. It's something that I've tried to keep it at the forefront of my mind. And I don't want a bunch of white baseball players. That's not interesting to me. The story is bigger and much more interesting than that. And I look there, the Josh Gibson piece. If you remember, I'll walk through that in a minute, and I'll tie it all together. I promise. So I had done that Josh Gibson piece. It was just kind of a hero shot of Josh Gibson swinging. I had the blessing of his family to do it, and part of the funds were to support his foundation. And so I did this hero piece, but I didn't find a strong story in it. So I finished it. It's like, I scrapped it. Let me start over. So I looked more and more through photos of Josh Gibson, and I found the one where he's surrounded by kids, and he's like kind of showing them his bat, surrounded by kids. Most of the kids in that photo were African American. I took some liberties with that photo, and I tried to make it a mixture of different races and cultures in there. Reason being, I wanted to highlight that Josh Gibson, or any African American player, or any player, he's not a baseball player for African Americans, or this is not a white baseball player. He is worthy and of being admired by all, and I want everyone to see themselves and those kids there, to find themselves in one of those faces looking up at Josh Gibson, because baseball is for everybody. Baseball has no race. So why does it even? It's just I'm trying to make that clear, and that's something that I work at here. I got an Ichiro piece that's all in Japanese.
And it's early. That's like that's one in the first 5, right?
Yeah, first time. I think it was 4 or 5. But
okay.
Anyway, and then got a Spanish one with Fernando, all in Spanish, and it's been important to me to seek out those stories that help everyone see themselves in these heroes, because baseball is for everybody, and it's really important to me for everyone to be able to find themselves represented in these pieces, in the story somehow.
So I know you'd mentioned that you do quite a bit of research while you're working on the covers. I can only imagine, just by even personally doing research on certain players and certain teams, was there a particular story? I know you've already told one, but is there a particular story or a particular player that you were like, once you were doing the research, started to learn so much about, that was just like, this is mind-blowing, I had no idea?
Well, I meant Al Hrabowski is a standout for me. And then also, speaking of Fernando Valenzuela was also, like, I'll call it transformative for me. I grew up in LA. Obviously, Fernando was a part of the culture here, but really putting the pieces together of his importance on the team, because I never connected these two dots here. But Dodger Stadium, there was a lot of Mexican families that were displaced to build Dodger Stadium where they built it in the Chavez Ravine. So there wasn't a lot of good blood with the Dodgers and the Hispanic community for years, and understandably so. Smash cut to Fernando Valenzuela in the majors, and having an amazing start in the majors.
So young.
So
at the time, and his rookie of the year.
Young,
yeah.
So incredible. From a small village in Mexico, he's on the world stage now. It was really moving to me to see this Hispanic player adored by this Hispanic community that had very recently had this upheaval with Dodger Stadium. And it was only 20 years since Dodger Stadium was put there that Fernando Mania occurred. So it's still fresh. You still have uncles and aunts and
people really lived through it. They lived through that. Yeah.
Years. So to have this, to have, what's the right word I'm looking for, to have this, I don't want to call it redemption because it's really not, you don't get your houses back, but to have this Hispanic player means so much to the community that was displaced. It was very like, it was just meaningful to me to do that and connect the dots. And I was just, yeah, the story was amazing.
Now, do you have favorite stories? Do you have favorite covers? Just visually, hey, look, you look back on it and it's like, oh, this one's one of my favorite. I really do enjoy this one. And I know it's like picking between your children, so don't like you've done them all. But is there some that stand out and it's like that one came out all right, came out really well?
I wish I had all of them in front of me. I do them so quickly. Trying to think of what I've done. I keep mentioning the Al Rabowski. That one was a lot of fun.
Right.
To do. For also visually, aesthetically, the Fernando one is interesting to me.
That's the El Toro one, right?
Yeah, El Toro. Yeah. The Ricky Henderson also stands out. It's kind of a one where all the colors and the composition all came together for that one. Gosh,
they're okay. So they're really cool.
What's your favorite? Tell me what stands out to you.
Oh man, Stargell. I really like Stargell because I think I romanticize. I was born in '78, and I've been a baseball fan in the '80s, kind of, and then early '90s really took off.
Mm-hmm.
But as I'm such a fan, I've gone back and I've read quite a bit about the like the '70s of baseball, which was literally like free for all. If you ever go back, if you ever want to be just hear like the most ludicrous, outlandish stories about sports, like if you hear the '70s NBA stories, like the ABA stories, like nuts. And so the Pittsburgh Pirates in particular, that team was just like it's even hard in 2021 to comprehend the stories of the '70s teams like the Pirates, the '80s teams like the Oakland A's and the New York Yankees. Like when you hear these stories and what's going around and around them, is just it's just insane. It's like it's almost like reading fiction. It's insane. So the Stargell stands out. I'm a huge Aaron fan. So you've done, I think, 2 Aaron covers now. I love them both. The Josh Gibson one for personal reasons. I'm a huge Negro League fan. The Clemente one, I'm a huge fan of that one as well. And then I will say this: the two another one that really does stand out, and you mentioned it already. Like, to me, this could be one of the coolest players that's ever played. Like, Ichiro is just so cool. Like there was nothing not cool about Ichiro in general. And so you did that, the cover that I saw with Ichiro is just so like, it's just so spot on. It's just like a cool cover, and he's a cool guy. And so but I love them all. Like I'm a fan of your work, Daniel, and kind of the idea of it is amazing. Let me ask this, because I know since you've done it, since you started the project, and we tend to think, because you're doing them every week, and you have an interesting kind of get it while you get it and then it's gone type to it. So there's not a back catalog. There's retired covers, and then there's, you kind of get them 1 week at a time.
Yeah.
How did that come about in regards to, hey, I'm just going to open these up for a week, then I'm going to close them? Because I know now there are people that are just coming on to Pop Fly Pop Shop. They're going back and they're kicking themselves, one, that they didn't find out sooner. But I'm sure you've been asked now to, hey, are we going to reissue? Talk to me about the idea behind this.
Yeah, that idea, and full disclosure, that was Topps Project 2020 that was responsible for that. And
I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, as am I. And I think that was really, I feel, the catalyst that really brought this all together. And like I said, I had done that work for my buddy, the Will Clark, and I probably would have done nothing with it kind of publicly, had it not been for Project 2020.
Oh.
And I saw that model. I saw that model of how they have things for a limited time and then it's gone. And then I thought about my own work I had done previously, not Popfly, but I had done a ton of sports arts before that. And any prints that I had would sit on the shelf for months or years, and it just wouldn't. They didn't move. So it's like, well, okay, I really like this idea of doing it timed. Maybe that will move the needle. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a very interesting concept, and it was sort of like, it was that very satisfying feel when that last puzzle piece just kind of sinks into the puzzle and
Right.
it's complete. Like that felt like when I discovered that, it's like, that's it. That's exactly what I need to do.
That's
So
awesome.
so just following that model, and there was a little bit of, I don't know if this is the right word, but just preciousness that I need to get over, because it's like, well, okay, I made this Will Clark. After this week, I can't do this again. Like I put all this work into it. What if people like it, but I can't do anything with it. I just kind of had to get over that and say, I can make more different pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make more artwork. Hopefully always better artwork, and be able to be okay with the temporalness of that, and just let it be what it is for the moment in time that it exists, and move on.
Is there one, like, is there somebody that's contacted you since something's been retired and was like, I really need this one, that you were just like, sorry, man. like I can imagine a former player, like if you've done like a former player and they hear about it later and it's like, hey, can you send me one of those? Has that happened, by the way? Is anything like
From
that?
a former player, no.
Okay.
Every week I get an email, or
Sure.
several
I can only
emails.
imagine.
Yeah, but it hasn't happened yet. But gosh,
That'll be
I hope it never happens. I hope it never happens. But I will say I've done this for a year. I've not reprinted one. Kept
Yeah.
true.
Very cool.
And if Will Clark came by, I'm like, here's a picture of it. I hope you enjoy.
Oh, geez. Now, you've been able to do some really cool things, based off of the growth of the project. One of the coolest things I've seen is your YouTube page,
Mm-hmm.
where you have interviews with some of the players that you have covers of. So I know Dale Murphy and Andre Dawson both have been able to sit with you and your host into kind of a round robin type interview style. How did that come about, and how cool is that?
I swear, cheese. If only my 10-year-old self knew
Right.
that I'd be spending my 42nd birthday talking with Andre Dawson. Like that's just nuts. But it started with Dale Murphy, actually, as most of my projects do, apparently. But he and I have become friends over the years. Started off as my favorite player as a kid, but I've done work with him and we become friends. And so when I did the reverse negative cover with Dale, I thought, it feels like Dale would be great to chat with him and talk about not only the artwork, but the card as well. It's a very iconic card. And so I just asked him if he'd be willing to, and so he was. And so I just, I threw the YouTube page together. It's like, let's do this. And then it became a platform. It's like, okay, I've done this once. And I can say to the next player, well, Dale Murphy's done it. Can you do it? So that was also part of with Andre Dawson. And then when Al Rabowski, I could say, Al, Andre Dawson and Dale Murphy has done it. Would you like to join us too? So it starts to builds on itself. And it's been such a cool experience. And that's been experientially one of the highlights of the whole project, is getting to work with these guys that like I said a few minutes ago, these are superheroes to little 10-year-old eyes.
Yeah.
To be able to talk to them adult to adult is just, it's still difficult to comprehend.
Now I want to ask, because we've talked about this a little bit off before we started. Have you been enticed? Have you been asked to branch? I know you're an artist that handles all different types of genres, and and this particular project is a baseball one. But have you been approached to do other types of, use your artwork to do other types of similar but different genres, whether it's music or basketball or whatever? How do you kind of weigh having to put out a piece every week, or a desire to put out a piece every week, to expanding some of the things that you're doing at a pop shop?
That's a good question. The short answer is yes. There definitely has been conversations to go into hockey or to football or whatever, and I do hope that I can get there at some point. I would love to not just become the baseball comic book guy. I like to see.
Not bad.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you now, Daniel. Some people, yeah.
Maybe it's good now. Maybe in 5 years, I'm like, oh my gosh. But
the world changes so fast. We're like, a couple of years from now, we'll be like, man, only if I was the baseball comic.
Yeah. Well, I hope to do more. But the reason that I really haven't so far is, yes, I want to sort of see this project to the end, whatever the end of that is, whatever that means. I don't know what it means. Okay. But there's also I just know baseball more, and I would have a learning curve. I know precious little about basketball, precious little about football. I think early 90s hip hop and WWF are like my two like
pretty much how I live my life, so we're good.
Yeah. And I know that the hip hop has been explored in the comic book realm, but I am interested in doing more, but later.
And I think, given the previous answer, and I know your previous answer, I think I know the answer to this. So there is no, at this point, there's no, you're not foreseeing an ending. No,
there not that I can see that it will end at some point. But I don't know when that is. I've broken these up into seasons, and each season is 20 releases.
Okay.
I'm just about to wrap up season 2, because I think at release number 37. And I fully plan on going to season 3, so we'll get to 60 for sure. And I'd love to keep going as long as there's interest, and as long as there's ideas.
Do you take a break in between seasons? Because once a week is a lot. The output of work is a lot right now.
I can't even tell you how much it is. I swear, like I do have a full-time job. This is not my bread and butter. So, and I have a kid, so that's a lot. It's a lot of work. And I do take breaks every now and then. I'll just take a week off. Just like I can't do it.
Sure.
But they're probably a small break. I want to keep the momentum going, but a small break after season 2 is done, and then come back with season 3.
Well, Daniel, this has been fantastic. So much. I could talk to you about this stuff forever, because I really am a fan of your work. I'm a fan of the time, and I'm a huge fan of baseball. You. Last question. You said something that sparked my interest, because again, it does. Like the pillars that you named are like the holy trinity of my life at this point. When you talk about wrestling, hip hop, and baseball in that sense. If you could pull a dream interview with a baseball player, any professional wrestler or former professional wrestler, who would be the on the screen there?
Wow. Still alive or at any point in time?
Make it anything you want.
Okay,
anything you want.
That's it. That's a really good question. I'll go to the WWF one first. And I hesitate saying some of this stuff, because it's like, oh, if you're a fan of Metallica and your favorite song is Enter Sandman, like, you don't get a lot of credibility for naming the first song on the first Greatest Hits album. But
true, I understand.
But Hulk Hogan as a kid, like he was wrestling, and I bought Hulkamania hook, line, and sinker
Okay.
as a kid.
Okay.
So I love Hulk Hogan and probably Hacksaw Jim Duggan are like my dudes. And don't judge me, but I love the Bushwhackers.
Okay. Okay.
But
No, I would judge you more on Hogan, but that's probably because later in life he's had a lot of problems.
I know,
So it's like, as long as you're young Hogan, like, we're fine. As long as we're like,
yeah.
the Hulkamania Hogan and no, that's good. I like it. I like see because I think this is located, like, wrestling, especially in those days, were way geography based, so like the territory days
Mhm.
before, and so we were never WWF, I guess, WWF fans as much growing up. We were always, so we were in Virginia, and it's kind of NWA territory. So Jim Crockett Promotions back in the
Mhm.
day, and it was North Carolina was really big. A lot of wrestlers came out of North Carolina, and then it was Virginia was in there. So it was NWA to WCW for basically until like the Attitude Era is the first time where I was like, okay, this is less cartoonish, like,
Mhm.
like less like Saturday morning cartoons. But yeah, no, so I'm in the same boat because I grew up a Ric Flair fan. I grew up as a kid despising Ric Flair. Well, because he's a kid, he cheats, and you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Everybody, you want to beat the crap out of Ric Flair because you don't know any better. You think,
totally.
yeah. And then obviously, as I got older and more mature, and kind of understood a little bit more of what the entertainment business was of it, you're like, oh man, Ric Flair's the greatest. And I
Totally.
struggle now because literally every time I see Ric Flair today, and God bless him, but when I see him, I'm like, come on, like, I just want Rick to make it through the day, like,
Yeah.
so. Um, so yeah, it's I was always a big NWA WCW person, but I do think you can learn a lot. Like, I've learned a lot through hip hop, wrestling,
Sure.
and those types of things. I'm like, yeah, it's not so bad. Well,
Yeah.
that turned
You
out
know,
okay.
totally. And I feel like I mentioned his name 10 times in this conversation, but Al Rabowski really, he keeps coming to my mind because I think of the wrestling connection.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
because he put on a persona. He was the only player that I can really think of that was beyond just a game face of intimidation. He put on a persona. He even had a name, the
sure.
Mad Hungarian, and he had like a backstory, with the ring and whatnot, and werewolves. Like, who does that outside of WWF? Imagine going to
Yeah,
your
there's
imagine going to your job. I'm like, I'm the super whatever, and this is what I do. It just he just showed up in a way that was super unique, very, very wrestling based, and no one's really done it since. And so that's why I think that's why that project keeps coming to my mind, is because it has its ties in like a wrestling philosophy, a comic aesthetic, and in a baseball.
sure. I think I think it's easier for pitchers. I think pitchers can get away with like
Yeah.
being more of a character, right? Because
Yeah.
they can come, especially relief pitchers,
Mhm.
but some starting pitchers. Like, if you go through like who are the biggest characters in kind of baseball, like just characters, and they
Mhm.
take on these mythical proportions. Uh, Pitchers always seem to come, and like the personas of relief pitchers are great.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, guys like Mariano come to mind, and for better for worse, John Rocker comes to mind. Like, these guys are just like, they come in for one inning, they can be nuts,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like hit 100 on the
Make it
gun and be
count. Make it
done with
count,
it.
baby.
So, but with that said, this has been such a pleasure, Daniel. Thank you so much. Please let everybody know where they can keep up with all of your work and what you're doing.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Cheese. It's been awesome chatting, and I truly could talk to you for another 3 hours. You can find my work at popflypopshop.com. It's updated almost every week, except for those break weeks that I take.
Sure.
And yeah, the editions are open for a week, and then once they are retired, I promise you I don't print them again. So good luck.
There you have it. Make sure you check out all of Daniel's work. This is the Cheats Movement. We're so excited. Please stick stick with us as we continue on having interesting conversations with really, really cool people. So until next time, we see it.